Today, we're going to be talking about how to win government contracts in the operations and maintenance space in 2025. Hi, Sarah. Good to see you again.
Hi, Yoel. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, my friend. Just for everybody who doesn't know you personally, do you want to remind them a little bit about what you do and kind of how you help companies here at SAS-GPS?
My name is Sarah Pagona, and I'm the Director of Business Development for SAS-GPS. We're a proposal writing, development, and management company that has worked in government contracting for over 25 years, and we have helped our clients secure over 45 billion in federal contracting wins.
Amazing. Awesome. So, what we're going to talk about today is just kind of get into the nitty gritty of like all that it entails to, again, work in the government space with operations and maintenance, right? The thing that we get asked a lot lately, Sarah, is like, what are the biggest trends in government contracting when it comes to, and again, we're going to say O&M a lot in this video, which means operation and maintenance, so just FYI. But what are the trends in government funded O&M contracts in 2025 look like for us?
Okay, well, there's been a lot of changes with the introduction of the new administration and a lot of the policies and things that they have put in place. But I think emphasis is still remaining on performance-based contracting. So performance-based logistics strategies and focusing on outcomes, um, availability and reliability, but really showing and proving that you have the ability to deliver and measure your results of what you're delivering, optimizing your systems, and controlling cost. Another one that we are seeing enter the space right now is integration of AI, especially if you are using AI to become more efficient and especially more cost efficient. So that's something that we're seeing as an uptick in proposals that is helping win. There's um there's some cybersecurity measures that remain in place also. Cybersecurity is going to remain a top priority probably for a really long time. So align yourself with the cybersecurity frameworks that you know. There's going to be an extra sort of requirement probably on people to prove that they have cybersecurity measures in place, especially if
Yep.
you're doing operations and maintenance for the Department of Defense or something.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and then a big one, and this one is, I think, big for everybody, especially if you're a small business, and you're probably kind of a small business if you're watching this YouTube video, right? Is that there is a push towards contract consolidation, which means that larger, like all of the contracts are going to be combined into larger like contracts, like vehicle like contracts, like GWACs, IDIQs. So you're going to want to really pay attention to those. The number of prime contract opportunities will reduce. So that's going to affect small businesses because when they do put out those set asides, your competition is going to be higher when they put out those small business set aside or single sort of job
Yep.
contracts. There's going to be a lot more people going for them because there's going to just in general be less contracts.
Yep. No, for sure. I think the consolidation is a huge thing that's happening in the space. So yeah, just I think that's important that we let everybody know. Kind of
Yeah.
that's what we see
Well,
in the horizon for sure.
yeah, there's just going to be a shift in small business participation. So this year, the government has removed individual agency small business goals in favor of these government wide sort of contracting requirements. So they're going to impact small businesses' participation. We recommend that you no longer rely on your set asides, and we will probably talk about that a little bit more in the video.
Yeah. No, for sure,
Um,
100%. Um, okay, great. Next question here that we have is what agencies or departments are most likely to be interested in investing in O&M contracts in 2025?
yeah, so the Department of Defense is one of the primary sources of operations and maintenance contracts. They allocate substantial funds towards like military readiness and infrastructure. The Department of Defense's budget is a little smaller this year and is undergoing some changes, so that will affect the um, the O&M landscape here. But we also see the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, actively renewing and optimizing its contracts. Recently, there's been something around 600 non-essential consulting contracts canceled.
Yep.
So there's going to be a strategic shift towards essential services. But that could open up operations and maintenance opportunities because operations maintenance is an essential service. So when we focus on critical infrastructure, there may be more operations and maintenance contracts, even though there's less contracts overall. NASA still has them. NASA seems to be able to kind of float. Um, and then the GSA, as always, has a commitment to modernizing the federal infrastructure. So infrastructure projects necessitate comprehensive operations and maintenance services to ensure, efficient operations of federal facilities. So the GSA is one. And then the Department of Homeland Security is going to be a big player. Maintenance of facilities, equipment, and the systems that remain critical to the operations of Homeland Security you're going to see probably some more operations and maintenance contracts there as those facilities expand.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Great. And I guess kind of going into that, because we've seen a lot of rapid changes in government, which is expected when a new president comes into play, right? How has the federal procurement process evolved with O&M contracts, right? And what should every business owner be aware of now that we have a new presidency in play?
Yeah, and I think some of it is still changing, right? So keep an eye on it. But we're definitely seeing a huge push towards increasing efficiency, reducing waste, and enhancing competition. You should be aware that the establishment of our Department of Government Efficiency has a mandate to streamline operations, cut redundant programs, improve cross agency collaboration, to reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies and modernize the procurement processes that eliminate some waste and expedite some of the acquisition cycles. So there's going to be some adaptation there because it's going to change some of how acquisitions work, right? Which is government contracts.
Sure.
I think a big one is the removal of those individual agency small business goals. So in 2025, they were replaced with an overarching government-wide business contracting requirement. So it's going to be a lot less predictable for small businesses to contract, and the competition is going to increase. So if I was a small business, I would be considering forming strategic partnerships like joint ventures, and subcontracting arrangements with larger firms so that you can continue to participate in the jobs and the work that you have been doing.
Yeah, no, for
So
sure,
good for
100%.
things to be more streamlined and cut redundancies, bad to be or a new way to figure out how to be a small business.
Yeah,
There's also we can't talk about changes in in any government programs without talking about the executive order 14173, which is the ending of all sort of DEI programs. So if that was something that your company did, you want to make sure that you are compliant with the new rules. And again, also heightened as we see less government contractors doing things like cybersecurity threats remain a vulnerability. And with things like tariffs, supply chains remain vulnerable, or become more vulnerable. So I think if you can figure out how to, show that you're helping or reducing cybersecurity threats and that you have a supply chain that is really secure, that's probably going to help you, if those things are relevant to your contracts. And again, AI, utilize it for efficiency. I think you might find some new opportunities there. So, and there's also some revised suspension and debarment procedures. Some of the FARs have changed. That's really technical and sort of getting into the weeds. So I would say, if that's something that you're interested in, why don't you just call? We can talk about it. But overall, in 2025 operations and maintenance changes, you're going to have to be navigating really a transformed environment where you're going to be seeing efficiency initiatives, really significantly altered small business participation goals, compliance with those new executive orders, and an emphasis in sustainability, cybersecurity, and technological innovation. So that would
gotcha.
be a good place to put your efforts.
Yep. I think that's a very well said statement there of what people need to do. Because yeah, I mean the government landscape is changing. Like we said, if you have a question or something, feel free to give us a call. We're probably mostly up to date with everything that's going on. And if not,
We're
we'll
certainly up to date with the FARs that you know dictate government contracting because they dictate how we do bids, and that's what
yeah.
we do, right?
Yep.
But it is really dry. And I think we could do a whole video just on trying to understand FARs. One of the
Yeah.
reasons that I think that we have a job as technical writers and proposal managers is because some of this stuff is very, very complex and kind of complicated to navigate and understand. And reading the documents makes you feel like you're insane. And so, when you do it all the time, we we get better at it. So
Yeah.
so we're here to help. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I guess the next question then, Sarah, like, is kind of logical in this, and you know what we've talked about, right? Is like, hey, here's some things that you should be looking out for. Here's the things that the government is looking out for. When does the government actually decide whether to like outsource O&M contracts or keep them in house?
So government agencies determined to outsource operations and maintenance service contracts, rather like instead of keeping them house when that cost benefit analysis makes sense to them. Most operations and maintenance is outsourced. So if you compare, obviously, cost benefit analysis, we all kind of know what that is. Compare your expenses of outsourcing versus maintaining it internally. With the reduction of government workforce, I think we're going to see that cost benefit analysis for outsourcing these things go up. Is does the government have the availability, the expertise inside of itself to do this job? And it may well not, right? Do they have those capabilities? If not, they have to outsource it. There is some legal and regulatory frameworks that help them determine whether to outsource. There's not a specific law talking about like outsourcing transactions, unless it's governed by state laws. So applicable federal laws, things like intellectual property rights, immigration, export controls, bankruptcy, things like that um, still apply. And then, there's mission impact and operational continuity, which, what is the impact of outsourcing this on the operation? Is it efficient? Is it effective? Will it continue to function if they cancel these contracts? We have seen a trend recently of them deciding that it doesn't need, they just canceled a whole bunch of contracts, right? Like a lot of contracts. And then suddenly there was some mission impact and some operational continuity issues. So we have seen some contracts coming back online. We have several clients whose almost entire contracts were canceled and they had to fire their workforce. And now their contract has been brought back and they have to find new workforce. So I feel like it's really kind of chaotic right now. That mission impact and operational continuity is not being looked at as closely as I think it will be in the future because we'll start to see things fail otherwise.
Yeah. No, for sure. 100%. Right. And again, that's just part of playing the game. You know, like in business, nothing is stable. Same thing with the government. It changes. You just have to kind of roll with it and adjust.
Well, and there's different theories about that, right? And I'm not here to give out on one or the other because I'm honestly don't know, but you know, definitely the government right now has been talking about like if they cancel it and it's fine, then they didn't need it. And if they cancel it and it's not fine, then they need it and they put it back, right? So it's sort of a slash and burn technique rather than strategic precision. But we will see things coming back because that's sort of the process that they're going through
Yeah.
right now.
No, for sure. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, not awesome for people who are losing their contracts, but good for
Mhm.
people to know at least what's happening,
There's
right?
still lots of contracts out there. I will tell
Yeah.
you. I mean, we are busy. We are as busy as we have ever been. There's just a shift in contracts, right? It's like a shift. That's going to hurt some people. It's going to help some people, and some people will learn to adapt and overcome. And some places won't.
Yeah.
Depends. And then in 4 years we'll do it all over again.
Yeah. Working with the government. Woo! All right. So kind of in that same, on like line of questioning here, right? What do you think are like the most effective ways that O&M firms and can find like secure government contracts like in 2025?
Okay, yeah. Monitor the platforms that they put government contracts out on, first of all. If you are not on GSA or some of those other vehicles that you could be on, probably invest on getting on them because you're going to see more of your contracts going through that, right? Um, go to industry events, start participating and having your voice heard and listening so that you know what's going on so that you can navigate it, right? If there's workshops or conferences, start networking. That is also going to help if you are in the like a small business or something and you're like, wow, I'm probably going to lose my contract to these larger vehicles. I'm going to need to subcontract. Those industry events are also good places to make connections, and leverage networking, right? So leverage your
Yep.
relationships with your contracting officers and any of your sort of key personnel and other businesses. So
Yep.
that would be my suggestions to help find opportunities and then yeah, find them so that you can win them.
Yep. Absolutely. And again, in that sense, like Sarah, like what are some pre-qualifications that the government's like, hey, these are important to us for O&M contracts?
Yeah, the biggest one I tell people every day on the phone is, are you registered on sam.gov? If you are not, pause this video, go look up sam.gov and figure out how to register, because you cannot win a federal government contract if you are not
Yeah,
registered on sam.gov. Um, and then, start detailing out your information that demonstrates both your financial and your technical capabilities. What does your past performance look like? Technical experience, financial stability, things like that. Like, make sure that you have the things that you need to win those contracts. And then there's agency specific requirements. So you're just going to have to look into those agency specific requirements if you're seeking to look and work in a specific agency, like the
yeah,
VA or state and local things. Yeah.
absolutely. No, I think that that's super, super important, right? Um, so here's a question that I think, we talk about networking a lot. We've said that that's going to be a key factor in this, this year for these contracts, right? Um, can you just dive a little bit more deeper into like what does that entail?
Yeah. So networking is should be part of your business development plan always. Um, Gets more important when there's shifts and changes, right? So, building relationships with key decision makers enhance your firm's visibility. It enhances your credibility. People know who you are. I have seen instances where you go to an industry day with the government, you talk to some of the contracting officers there, they get your information, and suddenly they are emailing you and saying, "Hey, look, this opportunity is coming up. We think you'd be a good fit. Check it out." Right? And you kind of get a heads up, and they may not be the person that's actually the contracting officer for that contract, but you can get some insight, right? You might know that things that are coming up ahead of time, or just kind of, it's just a credibility thing. You can also get feedback and improvement. So networking is not just going to like conferences and stuff, right? But when, like, let's say you submit a bid and you lose, should you ask for a review? Absolutely. You should have a meeting or some emails with that contracting officer and say, like, what could get some feedback, right? What could we have done better? Get some constructive criticism. Understand why you lost so that your future submissions can win. Do not skip that part. In fact, I would even suggest, even if you win, ask for the meeting for constructive feedback and say, how could we have done better so that
Yeah.
you also win the next one, right? People skip that step all the time. I think partially because if you win a contract, right, oh my gosh, there's suddenly so much that you have to do, like you've got like this huge list of things and we got to get them done in this time. Don't skip that step, right? If you lose, yeah, it's a bummer, right? You want to just move on to the next one. You don't want to think about like the things that hurt your feelings or that
Yeah.
you lost money on. um but don't skip that step, because you're just going to keep losing money on the next one. Then, like, why would you not? I'm a data person. Get all the data that you can get, and then use that data effectively to make your company better, make your proposals better. Yeah. And then, you might also get some information in there. They might be like, actually, like, you weren't the best fit for this contract, but there's another contract that we saw come out that, maybe you'd be a better fit for, we think, or things like that. So just keeping those lines of communication open wherever you can get them. And if you have an opportunity to do it, don't skip it.
Yep. I think literally that's going to be the mantra for this year for 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, obviously, I think we talked about like the importance of subcontracting. I think people understand by now, like, yes, it is very important, especially in when the big boys are going to be winning a lot of the contracts and you're going to have to be subcontracting quite a bit this year, right?
Yeah.
Um, but going a little bit more into that side of things, right? What are some of the advantages and challenges of pursuing IDIQ, which is indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts? Because those are, specific and they're special, and are they rare and far between, Sarah, or is there a lot of those that you see
There's
now?
a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not that rare. Or at least we see them a lot.
Yeah.
Some people like them and some people don't. It's hard sometimes to price them, I think, because you don't know, maybe this is a 5-year long contract and you're like, okay, I can offer you this service or this good at this price,
Yeah.
right? But in 5 years, that price isn't going to be the same. Or how much you do a job, especially in operations and maintenance, right? Like, how frequently will you need this service can change how much that service costs your company to provide. So that's why some people kind of don't like them. Um, they do have really intense competitions in IDIQs, so securing a spot on that can be pretty highly competitive. There's normally multiple spots though, so that's good. But that uncertain volume is, I think, probably the biggest challenge. But the advantages are, right, you have a flexible framework for delivering your services. And it is most of the time, it's a steady workflow, right? You have a consistent pipeline of work without repeating bids over and over and over again. Like each little job doesn't need another bid. So you're not spending money and energy on that. You're just delivering your service.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. And I think that's super, super important. All right, great. So moving on to like this, I mean, we talked about it briefly, right? But we talked about certifications and compliance, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I still think, and obviously you agree, right, that it's still important to get certified or and get certifications for the O&M, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
You should have your certifications,
yeah. So what are
period.
some that that you're seeing that like are very valuable and the government's like, oh, those are what we want to see when we're contracting?
So, if you are a service disabled veteran owned small business, get your SDV OSB set aside. Because the VA is one of the only places where they're keeping some of that set aside, right? The VA, even if it's not set aside, the VA sometimes has point systems that give more points to veteran owned small businesses and even more points to service disabled veteran owned small businesses. So, that one. The 8A business development program, if you can get that certification, if you're ready, okay, we can have a whole nother video on like, should you be doing 8A yet? But it's a program that assists small businesses in competing for federal contracts. It puts you in like, it helps you get like mentor protege opportunities, right? There's a lot of opportunities that go along with having an 8A
Yep.
that, would be sort of like that joint venture subcontracting kind of end of things. And then any of the other ones, the women owned small business, Hub Zone, there's not as much of those. I don't know if we'll see a drop in those, even. I think we're going to see a huge drop in those. But that doesn't necessarily mean um, that you shouldn't have it. So
Sure.
there's not, and then we're kind of really talking about federal, but just for a second, when we drop down to state and local, states make their own decisions about their subcontracting goals. So some of these set asides can affect if you want to do some state contracting as well, right? And that may be another place to think about being flexible. Like if the federal government isn't going to be a good place for you to do your contracting, maybe you start moving on to some state and local contracts, right? And so your set asides can matter. You may also, though, look into getting those set asides from your state. Depends wildly on the states that you're looking and working. And if you're looking and working in multiple states, like don't go thinking that you should bid on these before you've really done that homework. Like, do you have the certifications and all the things that you need to work in that state on the state level,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. No,
and then
absolutely.
I mean, in operations and maintenance, there's also some like quality and environmental standards. We are seeing some environmental standards also change or just completely be taken out of these contracts, even retroactively. We've seen contracts recently come back and they've said just the amendment is that we're removing this.
Yeah.
If
No,
that
for sure.
means you need to redo your pricing, feel free.
Yep.
Um, but it's always a good idea to have a good quality and environmental standards. So I would
Yeah.
say make sure you have, and having those certifications also is helpful. So
Yep. No, for sure, 100%. Right. And I think we've talked. I mean, we don't have to dive too deep into it because I feel it's very specific. But like, there's also like cybersecurity things that you have to take care of, IT stuff that you have to take care of. But I think one of the things that I think is really important is like the bonding, insurance, and liability for O&M. Right. So, what are like the most critical bonding, insurance, and liability considerations for these types of contracts?
okay, so bonding, insurance, and liability considerations for O&M. If you aren't already familiar with these, then you're probably not doing government contracting. But performance and payment bonds can be required to fulfill the payment to your contract, your contractors, your subcontractors, your suppliers. They want to make sure that you have those, so bonds are in place. So if you need to go check if you are able to get bonded and know how much you can get bonded for. Insurance is always a big one. Adequate insurance coverage. If you need to go do research on what some of these contracts that you're bidding on, pull that document up, pull what the insurance requirements are, look for like, the baseline, like what are they all asking for? Because there's at least a minimum, and make sure that you get that liability, workers' comp, right? Like you cannot do federal contracting without insurance. And then understanding your contractual liabilities and ensuring appropriate coverage to mitigate your financial risks. I always say if you have questions about the procurement, then I would say that have a procurement. You need a procurement lawyer that you can sometimes call and get help with. So if you don't have a procurement lawyer, or you don't know one, or something like that, like it might be like a. I'm gonna make myself seem really old here, but it just might need to be someone you have in your Rolodex.
Yeah.
I had Rolodex was when we were kids. We don't have them now, but
Yeah. No,
might
you're
be a
good.
contact you need to have in your phone.
Yeah. And again,
Yeah.
this is also like a good thing for people to see, like, because there's, I mean, like, again, I'm gonna say this till like, we disappear off this earth, but like, this is the thing that also, like, personally for me makes me upset is like, there's a lot of videos out there that are like, hey, you go and win your first, $100,000 contract with, minimal effort and spending 5 minutes on YouTube and then going to, sam.gov, right? But like, you're starting to see, as you hear this, like all these expenses that come with bidding on a contract, not even winning it, but just bidding on it, right? Which is important for people to know that, like, hey, like,
Well, you can put a bid in, you just aren't going to win. Like, it's a
yeah,
waste of your time. And I always tell people, time is money, right? So you can go throw your good time and energy towards something that you don't know how to do, and you haven't read your regulations, and you haven't done your your legwork, right? And you don't have your certifications, and you don't have the thing. And literally, that's basically taking your time and throwing it into a trash can.
yeah,
If
no,
somebody
100%.
told you something else, like,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the truth, right? And we want to keep people honest with that stuff. So yeah, so make sure that you're listening to who people who are actually winning, which is us. So,
Yay. You like to
um,
win.
yeah,
We do
we
like to
do.
win.
We're very, yeah, we're short, we're short. All right, so I guess let's jump into like more of like the proposed development and bidding best prices, right? Best practices, sorry. So, how should an O&M firm approach pricing and cost estimation in government contracts, especially today? Where like everything is, cutting costs and making being as efficient as possible. How do you actually price yourself then?
So, I mean, you're going to have to start putting together comprehensive cost analysis. What are all your direct costs? What's your labor? What's your materials? What's your equipment? And then what are your indirect costs, right? Like, what is your administrative expenses? Are you using QuickBooks? They keep raising their prices. How much are your utilities costing you, right? So then you kind of get this like really big holistic picture of just what it costs you to exist and do this job. Um, and then understand what the government is asking you and ensure that your pricing is going to be competitive. So, like, thinking that you're going to become a billionaire off of one of these contracts is just not realistic. It's never been realistic, but I would say it's highly not realistic in this environment.
Yeah,
So you need to be able to continue to exist as a company, right? But your pricing needs to be competitive and it needs to be realistic. And then risk assessment, and with there is some risk assessment with some of those IDIQ contracts, right? And so think about your potential risks, and as much as possible put those into your cost estimate so that you don't something doesn't change, the price of steel doesn't double and then you go out of business, although that's the price of steel is more of a little bit more of a construction issue, but like, yeah, there's so many factors, right?
yeah,
So if you don't have a pricing model made, I would suggest getting some help if you don't know how to do that, right? Getting some help getting a pricing model. And I always direct people to both the SBA if you're really new and you're a small business. The SBA a lot of times has resources that can help you for free. The SBA in my city runs out of a college, and they have college students who are working on things like learning to build price estimates or putting together marketing things, and they will actually take your business in as one of their like college jobs. Like
sure.
so sometimes the SBA is not helpful, sometimes it's helpful. So I would say, yeah, and like we offer pricing support here at SAS-GPS, and there are other companies that can help you put pricing models together. Pricing being probably one really up there on the top of the things you should be paying attention to, right? Like
Yeah,
we're operating. We are talking today about capitalism, and
yeah.
capitalism is about money, and pricing is about money, and it's like this is really, really what it's all about, right?
Yeah, I think people don't, maybe they do realize, but just to say it like very plainly, right? You can have a beautifully written RFP that like is compliant with everything, but if the pricing is off, you're not gonna
Yeah,
win.
I tell people I mean, there are best value contracts out there. So there are places where you convince them that maybe you're competitive, but not winning price. Like maybe it's not the lowest price, but it's a competitive price. Then, yeah, absolutely. But if you're like, several $1 million off of your competitor, like unless your competitor's proposal is trash, which does happen. But yeah, proposals matter a lot. But I could write you the holy grail of proposals, and if your pricing is trash, then everything's trash. So
Yeah, for sure. Right. And then I guess that kind of leads into the next thing that we want to talk about, right? Is like what are the biggest mistakes that you see people making when it comes to like RFPs in the space? And it's gonna be the same thing we always tell people, but Sarah, go ahead and preach to the choir.
yeah, I feel like this is actually the spiel I get to give every day. If you do not understand the scope of the project and the requirements to do the project, you can't do it. Right? So, I mean, insufficient understanding is a big one, but there's really good news on that, right? Is that that's just information gathering and understanding. It's just learning. And companies like us can help you look through proposal, if you're even near it. And we looked at one this morning and we were like, with a company that we have won probably 17 contracts for, like a lot. And we looked at one this morning and they were looking at it and we were like, there's a technology, cybersecurity requirement in this contract that we've never seen before. Do you guys have like a policy for that? Do you do this? And they were like, do you think it's applicable if we say we don't? Can we win? And so we looked at it again and they looked at it and we looked at it and we were like, I don't think you can win if you don't have this. And they were like, we won't be bidding.
Yeah.
We're going to have to go reevaluate. If this is going to keep popping up, we're going to have to go reevaluate some of our cybersecurity things.
Yeah.
So there we go. Like, right. It's so understanding is sometimes, I mean, literally it took a team this morning, right?
Yeah.
We had like 4 people looking at it all at the same time. So yeah, understanding, and if so, but you go through it, see if there's something you don't understand, you can ask a question. Also, your SBA might be able to help you there too, or your the contracting officer on that. Like if you have a legitimate question because what they have is not clear, we ask contracting officers questions all the time. Sometimes like 100 questions. Like here is the spreadsheet of questions that not all these bids that they put out are well done. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're reading it and you think, wow, this is really difficult to understand. Yeah, it might actually be like impossible to understand. And you may need to ask, everybody may need to ask the contracting officer some questions. A big one is ignoring the requirements, like saying like, well, I think I don't meet these requirements, but I think I can win it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, based on what information that you have, right? Like unless the contracting officer has told you something like you've got some insider information that says that suddenly you don't have to have the past performance they're asking for in the contract, like you need to go through that. And I think on our website we have a PDF that helps you quickly go through solicitations that actually you and I made, Yoel, that helps people sort of maybe understand how to quickly go through it using the search function, using keywords to look for those requirements and say, do I have that? As soon as you find one that's big that you don't have, stop reading, right?
Yeah.
And move on to the next one. And then when we get people who have been losing and submitting bids, right, and losing them, when we see them and reevaluate, we love to look at your past submissions so that we can see how we can do it better based on our knowledge. And the big one we see is vague responses, right?
Yeah.
That's going to undermine your credibility. So the way that a lot of these bids are written, it says the contractor will do X, right? And it's really easy to write, yeah, we will do that, right? And it seems like you've met the requirement in the proposal, but I mean, and yeah, sure, you just said that you would do it, but are you pinky promising? What are we talking about here? Give me some details, right? So when you say, yes, we can do this, you need to say, here's how we do it, right? With a fine level of detail, as much detail as you can fit in the page count,
Yeah.
truthfully. So those are the biggest things, right? Insufficient understanding, ignoring the requirements, and not providing enough detail.
Yeah. What about past performance and how that plays into them deciding? Because obviously you've jumped on calls when they're like, hey, I don't have 3 contracts like they asked for, but I still think I can win.
Yeah, past performance is really important. It's essential. And a lot of these federal ones, sometimes when you get smaller and you start doing state and local, And the more small that you get, municipal, right, small towns, maybe your past performance can be kind of a little pushed around a little bit more. But if they're asking for 3 projects of similar size and scope, and you don't have 3 projects of similar size and scope, then you need to find somebody who wants to team with you who has some projects that you so that you guys together can come up with 3. But reading those sections really carefully, because sometimes you can use your subcontractor's past performance. Sometimes there's like a lot of like understanding in that. But if you have just 0, right, like you're like, I've never done this job before, and they're asking for 3 projects of similar size and scope. Well, sometimes, and I get this, so I get this a lot as phone calls. So I think this is probably a good one. I used to do this job, and then I quit that job and I opened this business, but I have a lot of performance, right? Like I, as a person, as a business owner, have been doing this job for 25 years. I know how to do this job. They're not asking what you do and what you have done. They're asking what your company has done, right? But sometimes we can, like, if we think the solicitation is right and worded properly enough and doesn't have like really intense competition, we might can spin your past performance on that. It entirely depends. That I'm going to tell you, you're going to need a good writer, right? And you need somebody to really look at the solicitation and see if like that's even possible on that one. And I would say it's still really low where that's possible, but sometimes it does happen. But if you don't have that, and it's not that like 2% chance that we can sort of like spin for you, um, you need to be looking at that networking, joint ventures, subcontracting, and those kind of spaces. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, no,
So,
that's perfect. And I think that will give people some clarity on like, kind of what they need to do, right? Um,
mhm.
so here's the other thing too. There's how do change orders, contract modifications, and performance benchmarks typically impact O&M contracts? Because that's something that we're seeing, quite a bit now.
um, you need to have flexibility. So, like we were talking about risk before, right? Be prepared to adapt to changes in project scope and requirements, so that that you can continue to do the job. Maintain really good, like if you win a contract, maintain really good relations with that contracting agency and the people who are administering your contract, right? Open communication. It's okay sometimes to say, hey, that doesn't really make sense, or that's not fair, right? And sometimes they'll be like, oh, I see what you're saying there. Let's change this a little bit, right? So like having that good rapport, having that good communication, is essential. And then I love documentation. Keep meticulous records of all of the changes and all of the performance metrics in the contract that you signed and every single thing that has to do with it. Because if it changes extremely, you might need a lawyer, and you're going to want
Yeah.
that documentation. Or you might not need a lawyer, but you might need the documentation to change, like, and look back through your pricing, right? There's a lot of reasons that you definitely, be really surprised how many companies I talk to. They're like, I don't know where that contract is. I'm like, yo, you don't know the contract that you're operating. You don't have that paperwork. So yeah, like just as a person, I'm gonna say, like, become better at paperwork. Like, become a paperwork squirrel, even if you're just throwing it into a folder, right? Like at least you're storing it. Like,
Yeah.
that don't throw away no matter what folder, right? At minimum.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. I think that's really, really important, especially when things change so quickly. I mean, it is important to have documentation that says, hey, no, this is what was said.
And sometimes your documentation is through email. Don't delete
Yeah.
those emails, but you should. I save emails as PDFs if
Yeah.
I'm thinking that I need to document them, and I put those PDFs in a folder. But I
Yeah.
was trained in HR, so
No worries, no
don't
worries.
be afraid of me. I'm still nice.
Yeah. All right, Sarah. So thank you so much for your time. I know there's a lot to go through. There's a lot of good info in there that people can look into. If people have questions, like always, you can reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you. Where do you see O&M contracts going into 2025 and beyond, Sarah? Like, what is the predictions that we have at SAS-GPS and like what's going to happen with the government and in this space?
So operations and maintenance contracts are going to stay. There may be changes to how many of them are run by small businesses, or sort of like how you get on those operations and maintenance contracts. But just like custodial, we always like to say operations, maintenance, and custodial don't go away. Somebody's got to fix things and clean things. Nothing functions without it, right? So
Yeah.
we might see less in the Department of Defense, depending on their budgets. Budgets are going to affect how things go, but sometimes when budgets get shifted from one place to another, suddenly you have more operations and maintenance that needs to happen, right? So like operations and maintenance is a pretty stable field, but you have to be flexible in how you're doing it, right? Because some of how you're doing it is going to change. So if you want to continue to succeed in the operation and maintenance contract or secure and manage an operations and maintenance contract in 2025, I suggest, having a strategic approach, being adaptable, and really trying to stay on top of these evolving trends, shifting budget priorities, emerging technologies, right? Cybersecurity things, compliance requirements, get competitive bidding strategies, and you should still be able to find success in this space, right?
Yeah, for sure. No, 100%. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Sarah. I know you got other stuff to do, so we'll let you be. But just wanted to again to say thank you so much for all that great info, and I think people will find that useful. And again, if you guys want to reach out to us, we're here to help. Sarah, what are the best ways they can get in contact with us so that we can start helping them out?
If I had my way, you would go to our website. We have a lot of information on our website. We have a lot of resources for people on our website and on our YouTube channel. We have documents, we have blogs, we have all kinds of things that can help people. And once you've kind of reached the place where like you think you understand enough, you have something on your plate that you'd like us to look at with you, then on that website we have ample places to contact us. The online form comes directly to me and my team, and we answer it within 24 hours. Unless
Yeah.
it's like comes on like a Saturday night, it might be like 30 hours. We'll answer you on a Monday morning, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the contact form is the fastest way, or you can just call our phone number, or send us an email. We are really, really, really responsive. My team is responsive. So any of those ways I like email personally, because then we can set up a time that's good for a call for everybody. But we're gonna take your call no matter what. We're gonna answer you, even if you come in through the chat at 1 a.m. So
Yeah, that's what we do. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for the video, and we'll talk to you soon.